What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's any questions you have about anything we covered, or if you'd like to suggest a guest or topic, we're always checking comments on there. Love to hear from you guys and then be able to make them into a future episode. Today I'm going to be joined by Dennis Schroeder of Strictly Diesel and Driven Diesel Performance, and he's got a really unique story that I was really interested in learning more about all the different sides of the diesel industry and community that he's been on, and how he's built a highly successful company that's innovating products, and really try to pick his brain as far as some tips and things that all of us can use in our jobs and our businesses. And he's got a really unique story, so can't wait to tell it. Before we get to it, though, I want to remind you guys that our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off site-wide discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. If you use code 23diesel20 at kershaw.kaiusa.com, you get 20% off site-wide. They've got a lot of great gear, so if you're in the market for a knife for hunting, fishing, EDC, anything like that, they've definitely got you covered. Their latest model that they've released this year is the Duralock, which it's a really nice folding knife, and they've got a series of different blades and handle designs that you can pick from, but keeps your fingers away from the blade when you're opening, closing it. It's got a super smooth mechanism, and the blade's made out of D2 still. So definitely make sure, head on over, check it out if you're in the market, and use code 23diesel20 for 20% off. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Dennis from Strictly Diesel and Driven Diesel Performance, learning more about his business, his journey, and where the companies are at now in offering products to be able to help truck owners out there solve problems and help shop owners out there. Dennis, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. This is our first time chatting on the podcast. I've known about you and your companies for quite a long time, and I've really been looking forward to this chat today. We had talked a bit beforehand. You got me excited about power stroke parts, things you're doing with business, your story, which I know a lot of people are going to find inspiring, interesting, and be able to apply to themselves. So I look forward to chatting with you, learning more about you, your companies, and ways people can keep their power strokes running the way they need to.
I appreciate that. I think you and I have talked a couple of times over the years and just never put this together until now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It was really cool. And, I was thinking in sitting down for our chat today, I'm like, there are so many different directions I could go with Dennis. Like, I have a million questions, but I kind of wanted to start at the beginning for our listeners who may not know who you are, may not know your history in the diesel world and your companies. I thought it would be great to start all the way back at the beginning and when or what inspired you to get into this industry. And then we'll go through how it progressed and where it is now with some really exciting things you have going on.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's kind of two beginnings to where we are today. But mine was started in late 2000 when I ordered my first diesel pickup from Ford, which was going to be a 2001 F-250 crew cab short bed 7.3 power stroke. And I had been a car guy forever. And so I'd already been used to being in the Mustang forums from all my Mustang stuff. And so then I went looking for, there's got to be Ford truck diesel forums. And I happened to find some of those. And you start down that rabbit hole, and well, you just never stop going down that rabbit hole. And so, I got the truck, and sometime in early 2001, had a inkling to go out and fart around and make something in the garage to solve a problem I had with the truck, which was a petty little thing, but like everybody does on the forums or now on Facebook, I built something and I put it in the truck, and I was kind of proud of it, and I took a picture of it, and I started getting, hey, can you make me one of those kind of comments? And so I figured out basically, well, how do I get somebody to cut this? I think it was laser. The first thing I did, I think, was laser cut, and then I had to find somebody else that could bend it, and it had 5 or 6 bends. It was kind of complicated, and then I had to find a shop to powder coat it, and all of a sudden I had a part, and made a cheesy kind of PayPal store and started offering them, and it became kind of a way to subsidize tinkering with my pickup. And so about April of 01, the first iteration of this whole thing started. and kind of just snowballed from there.
What
So,
really, what really interested me or interests me about it is I went on a similar path, but didn't get into the extent that you have with building, the businesses and making parts and things like that. But it started very simply for me, and actually with a 7.3 as well. It wasn't one I owned, but I grew up in a Ford house, and being like a rebellious kid, I couldn't like Fords. So, but my dad loved them, and he bought it's a 2002 7.3, and it was my first exposure to a diesel truck, riding in one, seeing it, seeing the trailers that he would tow. And I thought, okay, this is really interesting. And then at that time, like you'd mentioned forums, that's what I did shortly after is, I looked at different trucks. I would, I don't remember how Google was real popular back then, but whatever the search engine was at that time, I found a couple, and then it just took off. And I would spend a lot of my free time reading. And I know that's transitioned now more towards social media pages, and things like that, but it's almost identical. Is something catches your attention, you get immersed, and you find people all over the country or even all over the world who are interested in this same engine, the same platform, finding the same problems, trying to figure it out, and you have this sense of community. Now, where you took it to another level, and this is where I wanted to focus in for a little bit, is you took that next step and said, there's a problem this truck has. I think I have a solution for it. I'm going to make this part and then allow this community that I'm a part of to be able to purchase it. Did you have any background in manufacturing or sales, putting that together back at that time frame, or was that all brand new to you at that time as well?
well, I guess I kind of did. My growing up, my father, for a lot of when I was growing up, worked for another company, but at one point he left there and went out on his own and basically became his own boss. And so I had seen that for a lot of years. And actually, while I was when I graduated from college, I started working for him for a while. It just wasn't a business I had enough interest in to stay doing it. And I eventually left and went down a different path. And but I was familiar with the process of running and owning a business. When I was in college, for extra money, I'd started my own little business doing computer service, basically. I'm going to show my age a little bit, but that was back in the days when you didn't just go buy something and stick it in a computer and plug and play. Said, okay, it works. Have a nice day. It was a lot more complicated, and sometimes getting things to play nice was a pain in the neck, and it was something I had a knack at. And so I had already a little bit on my own and a little bit, from my experience watching my father and later working for my father. I was already familiar with owning the concept of owning a business and doing that kind of stuff. And so it wasn't unnatural at all. And then I came up with the part I was talking about earlier, and it just kind of seemed natural. Okay, well, I mean, it can't be all that hard to go out and find somebody that can cut this. I've got a template. A friend of mine did CAD in college, and so he helped me, take the part I made, flatten it all back out, draw it in CAD, and so I had a CAD drawing. And once I had that, it just didn't seem like it should be all that difficult. So I went on to look, and I mean, it took me a little while to find all the different steps and get it pulled together, but yeah, it was like a natural thing. And I think my history of doing things and watching my dad led to a lot of that.
Yeah.
It led me to go down that road and be like, well, this can't be that difficult. We'll see if we can, make a few of these and make a few bucks.
What was it like when the first one sold? What was that feeling like? And did a light bulb go off that, oh, I
You're
could sell more of
talking
these?
22 years ago. Yeah, I'm sure it was. I mean, it was my very, very first website was literally probably a single page. It had a single part on it with a link to pay me by PayPal. And so, probably that first time I got that, an email, you made a sale, I was probably pretty excited. And I mean, the thing sold for $35. I couldn't have made but maybe $10 on it. So it's not like I was making a lot. But when it continued to sell, and when I sold, like a bunch of them, then it got really exciting because like, okay, well, maybe this was, wasn't such a silly idea after all. And so that I think it probably came a little farther down when I saw there's actually some interest in this. And funny enough, not all that long ago, I actually saw one on eBay that I was like, oh, I know where that came from. I made that, many, many years ago. I mean, we quit making them. God, I probably quit making it in like '05 or '06. So I haven't made that particular part in a lot of years now, um, but yeah, and I'd have to go look. I don't even know how many I made or sold. It was at least easily hundreds of them, but I don't know.
At what point did it grow to a level where you said, I need to do this full time, or I want to do this full time? This is the path I want to follow.
That growth was actually, well, I don't know what anybody would consider quick. To me, it seems kind of quick. I started with one part in April of '01. That's when I formed the very first company. And then I grew it, because I got into it more, and so to kind of subsidize and help, I added performance parts that were coming out, like the first Super Chips microtuner, or I mean, there's names I don't even, they're not around anymore. I remember selling Jardine performance exhaust. I think they're long, long, long gone. Um, we sold Volant and AFE very close to when they both kind of came out, it seems like. But I picked up, a line here or a line there, things that kind of went along with what I was interested in, and kind of went together, the typical intake exhaust and a tuner thing way back in the day. Um, and so as I started doing that, it started helping me to actually think about growing the business and doing different things with it, because it obviously provided additional income. I actually left my day job in mid 2004. It was like June of 2004, was when I quit my day job and went full time into just running the business.
I get
That was
that.
a big step. That was scary.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the questions I get from a lot of younger listeners who they know they want to do this, but they don't have everything set up financially, and they always ask, at what point, or can you ask a guest, at what point do they know that they should pursue this full time, and then how scary that move is, because you leave everything that you've had and the comfort and the predictability, and all of a sudden it's on your shoulders to think of the products, the shipping, the website, the customer service, all that stuff.
Well, and all that, I mean, all that was on mine already, the way it was. But the big thing for me was, at the time I made that decision, I had a wife, I had a stepdaughter, um, I had a mortgage, I had, a truck payment. There were other things in life. And so, and I had been in my job. I worked in the IT field, and I'd been doing what I was doing at that point close to 10 years. So I was making pretty decent money in the IT field. Um, and I'd moved up into a pretty good position. I was working for a large corporation, and we had everything. We had killer medical and 401k with a match. And so to think about leaving all that stuff, that's not an easy proposition. Um, and I'm lucky at the time. My wife at the time had gotten a good job, and we were able to transition our medical benefits to her, and it was an equal, if not better, plan. So it was a good deal for us to do that. Um, and I basically gave up the 401k and the paycheck for the hope that the business was going to keep going. And I looked at the business, and am I bringing in enough money a month that if I get rid of my day job money, I'm contributing enough to the household while I wait for some growth, because I felt like it would grow if I could put more time into it. But I still need to contribute to the house, and I got to pay the bills and everything else. And so am I doing well enough there to make that change? And that was kind of the decision. We put money in savings and said, well, we could probably go 4 to 6 months. And then if it doesn't pick up, if it doesn't do better than it's doing right now, then you might be back looking for a job again. And luckily it picked up, and obviously I never looked back.
I think of my own journey, and it was very similar with the fear, but the fear I had is I wasn't married, I didn't have children, but I was reaching an age where I knew that I would want that, and I thought this is my last chance to do it because I don't think if I take this risk right now, I won't do it when I'm older. And it was so scary. It was like two different fears because you have the fear of regret that I don't do it and I look back and regret it, and the fear of is this going to work? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? And how am I going to do
Right.
any of this stuff? And there's a lot of growth and opportunity that's there. I appreciate you mentioning that story because there's so many people that will reach out and ask, and they're younger people, which are the future of this community and the diesel industry, and they can kind of get overwhelmed with all the things that are out there. So they look towards people like yourself and the stories that you guys have to find inspiration and I think determination to just take the leap that they already want to take.
Well, and I certainly put in the time ahead of that. I mean, for 3 solid years, either before my day job or after my day job at night or on the weekend or whatever, I was consuming some of what would have been family time to build a business. And I initially it was if this provides me some funds to tinker with my truck or whatever, I didn't necessarily start the business thinking it was going to become my full-time job. I started it as kind of a hobby in something I was interested in, and I was good with computers, again, being in the IT field all that time. So building a website was a natural. So there were multiple facets of all that it was fun and entertaining to do. And then as it grew, it's kind of where it became, okay, maybe this is a viable thing. Maybe this really can go somewhere, and I had people to look up to in the business. Um, there were a number of people that, I mean, they were competitors, and sometimes, I mean, when you're young, you don't always look at competition the right way. There's times I'm sure I looked at them as people I didn't like. But in a way, I still looked up to them because they were doing it full time, and so I saw that path. I saw, well, if they can do it, I'm sure I can do it. It's just getting to a point where I'm willing to pull the trigger and leave. So somebody looking at doing it today, they might have to do it the way I did it. They might have to put in all the extra hours and do it on the side, and until they really build something that they can maybe go to part-time in another job, or work your way. I mean, it's definitely not the kind of thing you just go get a tax license and a business name and go, okay, I'm open. I mean, you'd have to have a lot of funds to start something like that way, but to build up to it over several year periods, totally realistic.
Yeah.
And I think it's how a lot of people do it.
Yeah, I think the majority, I think it's the right way to do it. I can't say that I did it that way. I think I kind of jumped in a little bit before I should have and had to figure it out really quick. And I wish I wouldn't have done that. I wish I would have taken more time and planned it out. As somebody had explained to me once, is with starting a company, either start it with a whole bunch of money or you're going to start it with a whole bunch of sweat equity and
Yeah.
build it to that point. And I think the sweat equity way creates more consistency. You learn a lot more. And I think it lessens the risk a little bit because, you're seeing part sales come in. I'm sure people were, sending you messages on forums or emailing or calling in. You saw the demand that was there that if you just would have left your day job, turned that on, you might not have got a call for a month or two or 6 months or 3 months. And that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then, if you have a day job and that's what's supporting you making the transition, you really have to look at everything in a realistic manner,
Yeah.
and ask yourself, do I have enough in savings? Is this a transition that I feel like I can make? If I put more time and effort, is it going to result in more income to offset what I'm giving up if I leave a day job? Is now the lack of ability to spend time and effort because of my day job, is that holding my income back on this? And if the answer is no, if it's, I don't think I'm going to make a significant difference putting 8 more hours a day at it, well, then maybe it's not the right time to try to make a transition like that yet. You have to be realistic about all of it, and really think about it, because you don't want to make that leap and fail. I think that would feel a lot worse than not making that leap for another year or two, or spending more time in a job maybe you absolutely hate, but it's getting you by in life while you build something. You know, that's kind of how I look at it,
That's
especially if you have family,
yeah,
kids, other obligations involved.
yeah. That's good. That's great advice. And I'm thinking, this point you're at with your business. Did you focus in on a particular truck, like you'd mentioned, a 7.3? Was it 7.3 upgrades you were focusing on, or how did it? Because when I think of what I know of you and your companies, I'd always think Power Stroke, and I'd always
Sure.
think where you guys are at. And I was curious how that intertwined with the growth of your business.
Well, I mean, potentially it held me back in some of the early years. I bleed about as blue as they come. Um, Both of my grandfathers worked for Ford Motor Company in manufacturing facilities in Ohio. My mother worked for Ford Motor Company in Ohio. I'm a Ford family as far back as I can remember, and so I've always been a Ford guy, and I mean every new vehicle I've ever purchased has been a Ford, and so that was that was where my love was, and then when I got the Power Stroke, and I was enamored with the truck, I just loved it to death. That was what my focus was. So while I was starting to add product lines, like when I added, Volant or later on uh, Magnaflow or whoever's exhaust systems. I think I had Dynamax early on. I probably put like a GM or a Cummins exhaust system on the website, because potentially one of these other sites, some of the sites I went to were not just Ford, they were all. So potentially one of those people might wander onto my site and be like, "Oh, that's a good deal. I'll buy that," or whatever. And I didn't want to lose out on the sale, but the stuff I paid the most attention to was certainly Ford. And honestly, it was that way for a really long time. I mean, even up to moving the business out of my house, which I ran it out of my house until 2009. Um, in 2009, we were sponsoring a drag race event here, and somebody coming from out of town Googled me. This is before I knew what Google Maps was. Google mapped me and showed up at my house and knocked on my front door unannounced. And I'm thinking at that point, okay, I got a kid here, and I got a stranger knocking on my door. Nope, I'm not so good with this. And so we quickly found a commercial location and got everything switched. So when he looked up Google, it didn't come up in my house anymore. And that was when I first moved out, and that was a little, I think, 1,200 square foot one bay shop. Um, and and then that was basically that way until mid 2010 when Nate and I merged. And that's really the point that GM and Dodge stuff more heavily into play for me. Up to that point, I had stuck primarily with Ford just because that's what I knew. And it's what I had the most experience with. It was what I was the most interested in. But once I merged with Nate and Strictly Diesel the way it is today kind of came to be, um, then we had to grow that thought process a little bit at that time.
How did I get this question as well with business partners and combining two different either skill sets or two different passions together, and you can make a really strong company that way. How did that arise in at that time frame that you mentioned? How has that led and progressed all the way to what we're going to be chatting about here shortly, which is 2023 and where you're at? But I'm really curious about the partnership and kind of merging um, both sets of interests and both skill sets together and to make something stronger or bigger or achieve a vision that you guys both had.
Some My memories showing its age. I'm not going to remember the exact years all this stuff went down. I want to say it was somewhere around '06 or '07. Nate and I met, and he ran his small shop, Strictly Diesel in Scottsdale here, and I was running ITP Diesel at the time. My primarily online and manufacturing So I was doing the parts thing. I was doing online sales, and I was building my own product, and doing, doing some other stuff, like back in those days, the A-pillar gauges was a big thing. It was before the digital monitors really existed. And I would build completely assembled A-pillars, painted to match, all the gauges installed, pre-wired, ready to drop in the truck. That was one of the things I did for a number of years. So I did those types of things. And Nate and I met through a local truck club that a friend of mine and I had formed, and so that's how we came to know each other. And then I started referring people who wanted work done to him. So they'd maybe come to me and buy one of those gauge pods, or they might buy one of our fuel systems, or whatever. And they'd be like, "Do you do installs?" And at the time, I'm a one-man operation, and it's all I can do basically to keep building parts and doing orders and shipping things. And so I started saying, "No, but this guy across town he can get you hooked up." And so he'd refer some people my way for certain parts, and I'd send people his way for service or install work or whatever else. And we just became friends. And then somewhere in there, '08 maybe, '07, '08, the NHRDA came to town, and Nate and I had sponsored a local diesel drag race. And we're talking small. I think there was like 10 or 15 or maybe 20 trucks max, maybe, and nothing fast back in the day. But Randy had come down at the suggestion of one of the members of our local truck group, and checked it out. And so, standing in the parking lot at the racetrack, we basically agreed that we would, for the next one, we would involve the NHRDA, and Nate and I would co-sponsor it. So the very first NHRDA event that was here was sponsored by Strictly Diesel and ITP Diesel, both as title sponsors. So we were good friends. We had very similar desires. We wanted to support the racing, and we wanted to see that show up here. He wanted to support my business and help me, sell parts, and I wanted to send people his way to get, service and repair, and/or, stuff that people bought from me installed. And so it was like a good working relationship. And one day it kind of dawned on me that if we kept going the direction we were going, which I had, when I was in my one bay shop, I had hired somebody to help me finally. I had my daughter working with me at the time as well. We were starting to grow. I started occasionally doing installs of certain things for people, like the gauge pods, or sometimes a fuel system. And I knew he wanted to form a website that was going to be capable of doing e-commerce sales. And it dawned on me, we keep growing in the direction we're growing, we're going to become competitive. And I was worried that would wreck a good business relationship. And I talked to my wife at the time. I said, "This is a thought I'm having. It's kind of a nerve-wracking thing to think about, going from being entirely your own boss to having a partner." But we kind of decided it made sense. And so I approached him and said, "Hey, what do you think of this idea?" He had previously had partners, and it wasn't a situation that ended on the best of terms. And so I kind of knew he might still be licking his wounds from that. And certainly I didn't want to go down that path and have a problem. So we might have spent close to a year planning the merger, because we basically said, "Look, you've been down that road. I haven't. Neither one of us wants to have a problem. We both, have families to support. How do we do this where, if it turns out we don't work well together under the same roof, not each of us being our own entire boss, and we have to go our separate ways, how do we both leave this and still have our income stream, and still have our ability to go and do what we need to do?" And so we spent a lot of time very carefully talking about every issue we could think of that might arise, and how to structure the business from an LLC standpoint, from a tax standpoint, from every standpoint. We talked to the lawyers, we talked to the CPA. How do we do this so that if we had to just go, "You know what, it ain't working, all we do is fight," or whatever, we can each go back and basically be the same way we were before. And so I think that planning was important. for both of us, obviously to build trust and a little faith in the fact that what we're doing is not a mistake. But I think it was also important just to have all those conversations. And then, yeah, June of 2010, it all officially went live under one roof.
What was it like after you guys had done all the planning? Did that take a lot of the guesswork out of it? So at that time you just hit the ground running, or what was the kind of the feeling in the building and with the business right after the merger and you guys are, together?
I'm pretty sure we hit the ground running. I mean, we planned a lot of stuff. In the time that we were planning all that, we went and found a building to be in. I was coming out of 1,200 square feet. I think his Scottsdale shop was like 3,500 square feet, if I remember right. I want to say he could get maybe three vehicles in the shop at once, and that was tight. And then parking vehicles around the shop was a nightmare. That situation was just not good. We found a 15,000 square foot building that was really close to where my current location was at the time, and it was actually probably less than half the distance from his house. It was closer to home for him. Um, and so we went in and we signed a lease, and they did some reno for us to kind of build the office the way we wanted it. And then we planned everything. I mean, before we even moved into the building, I think we'd planned and bought a phone system, and we'd bought computer equipment, and we had things set up. So we pretty well hit the ground running. Um, you know, I used my computer background, and basically, I combined my QuickBooks file and his, and I pulled all the clients together, into a new file, and I pulled all the vendors together into so a lot of things were set up and basically waiting for us to push the button and go. And it was just a case of moving everything in and getting it all working. So a lot of it was pretty simple. We did lose an employee in the process, and I look back and I think today that was probably an okay deal. It sucked at the time. We were a little upset at the timing of how it went down and whatever, but I think that ended up working out for the best. And I think everybody else, they might have had a few questions on it, but I think once we got in the new space, he ran the service and repair shop, and the guys that worked for him previously just kept on working the way they always did. And I ran the parts side of things, and we kind of did our thing, and it was all under one set of books. And we basically kind of each did our own thing to the best of our ability. And we kind of left each other alone unless it was a major business decision. We didn't go spend a lot of money without talking to the other partner, or we didn't do something, that would be significant or drastic, a major change in advertising or, anything along those lines without saying, hey, let's sit down and have a chat about this. Let's make sure this was what we both agree is the right way to go. But then, I pretty much left him alone in the shop, and he pretty much left me alone to do parts and the internet and whatever else. And we just kept doing it. But now I didn't have to send anybody anywhere. Somebody called me and said, hey, can I buy this? Yeah. Okay. Where can I get it installed? Right here. Bring it in. And the same thing, somebody in the shop, maybe had a need for something that was mine. They didn't have to be sent anywhere. He didn't have to come buy it from me. He'd walked in and grabbed it off the shelf and installed it, and everybody was happy. So I remember it being pretty smooth, but we put a ridiculous amount of planning into it, probably more than most people do, just because of the history he had, and me not wanting him to worry that was the direction we were going to go. And honestly, I didn't want to have to worry that that we might have a falling out. At least I wanted to know that if that happened, well, we each have a way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what's so valuable with that is I've seen it a lot throughout the years, either from like your perspective. So somebody has a website, they're selling parts, but they're not doing the install, or it's a shop that just is doing installs. They think, hey, I want to sell some of these parts. People come in and ask for things, and it'd be nice to be able to get them. And I've seen a struggle that each person can have, either stories or even personally I've known, in being able to merge or do both. So I was really curious about the success and how that went initially, and then I think maybe a little bit after that was, I don't know if it was a magazine that I had saw one of your trucks in. I want to say it was. My memory's getting tested a little bit, but that's when I first had heard of Strictly Diesel, and that's when I'm not in Arizona, so that was nationally, that I knew about you and had seen the truck. So I think that's going to provide a lot of insight for people who may be thinking of doing that, or they're just curious, because it's tough to find somebody to ask and say, hey, I do installs and I also want to do part sales, or I do part sales, also want to do installs. Who can I ask? What are some tips for it? It's so hard to find that. So that's a part of your story. I think it's going to help a lot of shop owners and business owners out there that may be thinking about doing something like that.
Those two things are quite different. I will say this much, and I think it goes for both of us in this partnership. I think we've both learned a lot since the merger. I had no idea how a service and repair operation ran. I had no idea. I never thought in terms of parts and labor and the things you have to think about in a service operation when I was building product, and he didn't have the web and e-commerce background. He just he knew he wanted to go there. But now, I look back and I go, but as busy as he was with the service and repair operation, I don't know that he had ever had the time. He would have been certainly bringing in additional employees and whatever to try to run a web operation. They're so different. The skill set you need to do them is very different. I think it's a tough thing. I'm glad we formed the business the way we did. I'm still not very involved in the service and repair shop. We still make major decisions together. There's certain things, because we have employees and whatever. There's certain topics that always get discussed, between us, or including our general manager as well. And then there's other things that it's just like, just handle it. That's your operation. We're still at it all these years later. Clearly, we're doing something right. Just handle it. And kind of the same, we'll have suggestions for each other or ideas or whatever else, but then we kind of just let each other, handle it. And so I think that's worked out well for us. I think it would be difficult to manage it all, as a single person, unless you were in a position to afford to hire a number of people to do various different tasks, because
Yeah.
both pieces of that can get very tedious and be very time consuming. And so
My background was in parts, and I remember whenever it came to the service or the repair side, it was like a whole other world for me. And just trying to, I never could have absorbed it. I never could have done it the way they did. And just trying to learn a little bit like I did, it was just, I knew I wasn't going to be good at that. I knew just to listen to them. And if they needed parts on a certain day, get them there, expedite it, make it easy for them. And likewise, I don't know if they necessarily wanted to chat on the phone or browse price sheets and update pricing and do all that stuff. They want to be working on something, diagnosing, running that arena. So I agree with you. It's a really hard thing to do. But I think going back to the partnership discussion that we had, and if someone's looking at doing that, taking some valuable lessons from your experience and then applying it towards their venture. Now, if you take me from that point to almost where you guys are now, because there's an evolution, and we were chatting during this podcast. I've seen an evolution of your story, and it combines so many parts of the diesel industry and the community that I rarely see. I've rarely seen it go from the very beginning, like 2001. I wasn't into diesels. I vaguely remember them. You starting it then, through this whole progression to where you guys are now and where you guys are going, really, really fascinated me, and I haven't seen it before. So this is part of the reason I'm really excited. Is how did you go from there to where you guys are now, and what's coming in the future? What are some things you guys are working on?
Well, I guess once we merged, once we moved into the new building, obviously we had more space, we had more place to put vehicles. it certainly made things easier. We had more inventory storage space. I had, I had a very large place, for us to do assembly. It just allowed us to grow, for example, in the amount of inventory we could keep. And the amount of inventory you can keep is a lot of times a direct connection to the amount of customers you can support. If you don't have the space, or you don't have the money to buy the inventory, for example, to keep enough to build, I don't know, 50 of whatever part it is you're talking about, you can't support, if you get crazy busy or whatever. Now you're scrambling and trying to get more parts in, or whatever it is. So that growth, me going from 1,200 square foot, him going from 35, and the two of us going into 15,000 square feet, it really gave us an opportunity to start figuring out, okay, how do we grow the rest of this? Okay, we just upscaled the building big, and we had very similar sales figures at the time. So we essentially took two businesses that were each doing X, and put them into one business that's now doing 2X. We doubled our sales volume when you coupled it all together. Well, it gave us the ability to put more inventory on the shelf, or to explore, okay, well, now I've got some money to do some prototyping, and maybe try this idea, or whatever. That's part of the growth, I think, was the two of us together. If the service side was slow and the parts side was busy, we backed each other up. It kept us always, in the black, and moving in a positive direction. Um, we've certainly we've certainly gone through some growth. I mean, we signed up at one point for some training, and I don't mean technician type training, although we look for those opportunities for our guys as well. But we signed up for management training, because both of the two of us looked at each other and said, well, let's see, you were a mechanic, and you became a business owner, but you're still a mechanic. Me, I was an IT guy that became a business owner. I'm I'm still a technical IT guy. I geek out on designing things, coming up with ideas, but I never had any business training other than what little bit I saw of my dad, but nothing formal. I didn't take business in college. Neither one of us had ever been formally instructed on all the business crap that goes with a business. He wanted to work on trucks, and I wanted to make parts for trucks. And so, we had those epiphanies where it's like, well, maybe we need to explore this a little bit, and learn how to do it the right way, because there's a good chance we're not doing it the right way. And so we certainly learned from that prospect, and that's been big for us. Um, we were in that first 15,000 square foot building for 7 years. We tried for the last three of those to find another place, mostly because we didn't care for our landlords. But there were some logistical problems with the way that building was laid out, and it was making some things difficult. Even though it had all that space, it was a daily exercise of Tetris to move vehicles around, and whatever. And I mean, we had explored designing and building. We designed or explored buying existing buildings, and we were on the verge of signing another lease extension, because we exhausted everything we could look at. And one day our real estate guy comes and says, I got one for you to look at. And after 3 years, we walked in a building, walked around, and I mean, I don't think we were in this building 5 minutes, and we're looking at each other like, yeah, this is it. And so in 2017, we moved into our current location, which is about 18,500 square feet. But it's configured so much better. It's got so much more storage. It just everything about it for us has worked out much better. The location is I think better. Just it was a good move. And around that same time, or shortly after that move, we promoted one of our service advisors to be a general manager. That's one of the best things we've ever done. He'd been with us since we moved into the old building, or right after we moved into the old building in 10. So he'd served with us for 7 years at that point, and knew everything in and out all over this place. And we knew we were going to keep growing, moving into a bigger place. afforded us more technicians and whatever else, and was like, we can't keep managing this ourselves. And so, we've gotten where we've gotten through learning and growth and things that aren't easy, like hiring a GM and giving up control of some things and being like, okay, you handle this, take it off our plate. We're going to go handle this and this. Not easy steps to take when you're used to, I'm going to, kind of the old, if I want it done right, I'll do it myself mentality. That's not an easy thing to back away from and delegate. But it's been phenomenal. So much more recently, as part of all that growth, we finally accomplished something I've wanted to do for a long, long time, and that's we've brought our CNC operations of all of the custom parts we make in-house. Uh, for about 15 years, the same guy has been making all of my parts, and he ran his own shop, and I was at the mercy of his schedule and when he could get things done based on his other customers and everything else. And we had an opportunity to acquire two of the machines that made our parts and acquire the guy who's been making our parts for 15 years and bring it all in house. And so that's going to be huge for us for growth. We're literally on a daily basis running parts in our own building now, and that's something I've wanted for probably at least 5 years, if not longer. And we finally were able to make that happen. So that's been really, really exciting too.
That is, because it gives you so much control, and I think bringing it closer to the source where the ideas you guys may have, you have more control over the design, the manufacture, the packaging, everything you guys are doing. And that was another part I was really curious about, is the manufacturing side and coming up or designing with fixes for problems that people are going to have with their trucks. Can you talk to me about that side of it as you guys are ramping up production and making, products that either shops can use, or, people that, own one of the trucks are saying, hey, I heard about this, I saw it, I want this, I'm having this problem, this will fix it. How's that been, or what's it been like through this journey from the very beginning to now, where you're now manufacturing products that people can buy, everywhere, and be able to fix their trucks or stock in their own diesel shop?
There's something really satisfying by having an idea and figuring out how to produce something to address that idea, whether it's a problem or whatever else. I go back all the way to that very first part I made. Like I said, it was $35. It was a silly little bracket. It was something that annoyed my wife at the time, and I fixed it in my garage, and then some other people liked it and went, "Oh, that's cool." That snowballed. We've been known for many, many years for fuel system stuff for 7.3s and 6.0s. That kind of initially started out as a problem resolution. We were all chasing a particular, known issue, and a number of us together on the internet had come up with solutions that worked really well to kill that issue. And then as performance stuff became more and more popular, as bigger injectors became more popular, it also in turn solved the problem of having enough fuel to support somebody wanting to make more horsepower, run a bigger injector, whatever else. And that's kind of how we've approached a lot of things. Having had a good machinist at my fingertips, or at least accessible to me, for a long time, and people who can laser cut sheet metal, water jet sheet metal, bend and weld sheet metal, powder coating, basically all the different processes you might need to produce a product, I've got access to. We've had opportunities for years to make all kinds of stuff. The hard decision for us was choosing not to make things that somebody else is already making. Good example, but kind of stupid. The first person I can remember ever selling coolant filter kits, and I could be wrong, there might have been somebody before him, but the one I can remember was Bob Riley at Diesel Site. And everybody under the sun has coolant filter kits. The 6 liter came out, and it became oh, every 6 liter needs one of these. And so now you can buy one from every different brand in every different color and flavor and whatever you want out there. And I always looked at that and thought, well, it's kind of, I think it's kind of bad form, I guess, to look at that and go, well, I can make that. I'm just going to go make one. I could have done that easily. For many, many years, I could have been making and selling coolant filters for everything under the sun. I always felt like it was the right thing to do when we needed one in the shop, to pick up the phone and call Bob and go, hey, can I have one of those? Send it my way. We got a customer that needs it. I'm supporting the guy that had the idea in my mind. I mean, like I said, if there was somebody before him, I don't know who it was. Bob was the original that I remember. I felt like it was bad form to rip that off from him. And certainly we've had some of our stuff ripped off, and that's it's a two-way street. I try to give people that and in hopes that it maybe will alleviate some people ripping us off. So there's a lot of things we could have made over the years that we've chosen not to. We tried to stick with making things that were our idea, or that were at the very least, if it was a joint idea or something, somebody talked about online, it was a case of, we figured out a unique way to do it, and nobody else was mass producing it. And whether they do now or not, I don't know, whatever, but we tried to stick to stuff that wasn't already out there. And so we always kind of went with the ideas that came from a problem. So more recent stuff, here's one that we don't make anymore, but when the 6.7 came out, 6.7 Ford, they came out originally with plastic oil pan and a yellow plastic drain plug that liked to break. And then a little bit later, Ford figured out just what a piece of crap that oil pan was, and they started releasing them with a stamped steel oil pan. The stamped steel oil pan was only a minor upgrade. They still did some things that were weird. We decided early on, this thing sucks. All right, I guess this is a good reason to try finding somebody to do casting. We'd never done casting before, and so we found a place to help us design and manufacture a cast replacement oil pan for the 6.7 Power Stroke. Now the casting process is not quick. It took a while to have tooling made, and then have initial castings made, have those go to the machine shop, get them machined, test fit them. Okay, everything's right. Now we can send it to production. It's not a fast process. And in the meantime, somebody came out with a sheet metal, a welded sheet metal version. But when ours came out, we still felt like we had a something that addressed multiple problems. It got rid of the cheap plastic pan. It replaced the stamped metal one as well. And in both cases, it did it with a drain plug that pointed down at your drain pan instead of sideways, which was always a mess on the floor, especially if you do your own service, because obviously it'll shoot out farther when it first starts and then back off as it drains some. The other thing that I always thought was really dumb is they didn't put the drain in a place that you could put a single oil pan under the truck and drain the filter and the pan at the same time. We thought about those things when we designed the pan. We're like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, it's going to be a nice durable piece. We're gonna put the drain as close to the oil filter as possible. You slide one pan under it, pop the filter, pop the drain. It all drains at once. It drains straight down, doesn't make a giant mess. We actually designed it to use the 6-liter Ford factory drain plug and copper gasket, which we know was readily available, easily replaceable, durable. I shouldn't say that. I originally designed it to use an O-ring, and then we decided that's kind of dumb. The O-ring's going to, after a few cycles, need to be replaced. So that's when we converted it to the 6-liter drain plug. That was before even going to production. We tried to build it in a way that it fixed problems and made life convenient and better for whoever was using it. And we did really well with those for a while. And then everybody under the sun that makes any kind of trans pan, oil pan, whatever else came out. And now there's like a dozen of them or something on the market. And we quit making them because we couldn't compete, because we're making them in small batches and they're making probably hundreds at a time. And so we finally had to back away from that. But that's been our approach. Same with our Duramax power steering lines. It was a known issue. There were a few people at the time that were making hoses where you could essentially cut your factory lines, or you could send your factory lines as cores in, and they would cut them, fit a different end on, send it back with a different hose, but you were basically using factory tubes, and either as cores or as the base. We said, well, cores are a nightmare. They're a mess. Who wants to deal with that? Who wants to deal with extra shipping, everything else? Let's just make a brand new from scratch tube. Let's make it out of stainless. So the tube's super durable and lasts a lifetime. Let's put a replaceable hose in it, and so we've been building those because we didn't feel like it made sense to deal with cores on something like that, or that it made sense to deal with the line that maybe has already been on for 100,000 miles and might have some wear or some rub through or some whatever. Let's just manufacture a new part. So our take has always been, let's try to address something in a unique way. And so our product line has remained a little smaller because of it, because we just haven't gone out and made everything that everybody else makes. We constantly are looking for new ideas or new ways to do things.
What are you had mentioned the Duramax lines and some other things. What kind of products do you guys offer now, and what problems do they fix on any one of the three trucks?
Well, like the one that we manufacture, the only thing we manufacture of ours for the Duramax is those power steering lines. Not that, we haven't had one of those other, unique epiphany ideas of, oh, hey, we could do this. A lot of times somebody's already done it. For the Cummins, probably the big thing we do was not our idea. We sell a fan hub adapter that allows you to run a mechanical fan clutch on a bunch of the Cummins motors, 6.7 Cummins motors, instead of the electronic fan clutch that's notorious for being problematic, not always working the way it should, and whatever. That product was actually developed by Aiden at GOS Racing, and we were using it in our shop many years ago on some Cummins conversion trucks we were working on, and we really liked it. They were just really hard to get. We'd call and he wouldn't have any or whatever. And so I finally approached him and said, hey, I'm not sure how you're working on this, but would you let us take a look at making these for you? Maybe we can get your price down, and maybe we can, get you a better availability, a quicker turnaround, whatever. And so he allowed us to do that, and we built one. We sent him, a sample. We gave him a quote. He liked the quality of the product, the way our machinist does things, and he was happy with the price, and we've been making it ever since. So I don't even take credit for that one. It was entirely his idea. We just did a really good job of manufacturing it for him, and so to this day we still do. And now we build. With that, we also, if you don't want to have to buy the adapter, the bearing separate, and take your truck apart and involve a press and press the old bearing out and press a new bearing or your old bearing into the new part. If you don't have the capability or the tools to do that, we actually sell a reman assembly that's the whole bracket with a new bearing and his hub in it, so that you can just unbolt and bolt and be done in short order, and then you just send us the core back on the bracket so we can build the next one. So we've been doing those with that as well. We've also got for the guys that are keeping the electronic fan clutch in the 6.7 Cummins, in some of the 6.7 Cummins, because it doesn't work in all of them. We've got a switch that'll allow you to manually run that fan more aggressively. So if you're pulling a hill or whatever, you need some more cooling. We've got an electronic mod to that fan that'll run it. It doesn't work in every year and every configuration, but it works pretty well in the ones it does. Still to this day, most everything is Ford, and a lot of our manufacturing is still heavily geared toward the fuel system stuff. We've got lift pump kits, both for stockish level trucks and high performance stuff that includes all the filtration you need. We've got the regulated returns we've always built. And then more recently, it's still been a few years, transmission coolers for all the 6.7 Fords. So 11 to 16 and then 17 to 19, all the 6-speed 6.7 Fords. We've got a really good transcooler kit that works really well in those. That was developed because I bought an F450 and a 48-foot race trailer and couldn't believe I was looking at 260 plus degree trans temps.
Wow. That's getting up there.
Yeah, toasty. So, it's always the same thing with us. It's the guys in the shop, see a need for something, or like in the case of my F450, I was seeing a need for something and looking, and nobody had a trans cooler, and but it's usually a case of, there's something, we see so many trucks in and out of the shop, and we go looking, and nobody's doing it. Well, that's something that we'll investigate. If somebody's already doing it, I'm really hard about not copying other people's work. I don't want it done to me, and so I don't do it to other people. But
That's one of the toughest things to find as a diesel enthusiast, diesel truck owner. I imagine even shop owners as well, is it can be tough to find these fixes through maybe a traditional search or the traditional places that you look. You might not see it, especially nowadays. It's very much like, what are the most popular products and things people do to their trucks? But you run into these issues with, any of them, where you're like, I need a fix for that. Where can I find it? And I think that does a lot for not just the industry, but the community, the truck owners that are out there. I find that in so many parts of my life. It doesn't have to be trucks, but I run into a problem, and it's so hard to find this one solution. And then I find this one company that does it, and it's like, oh, this just solved everything for me. But it took a long time to find it. So I think what you guys do, social media, through awareness, through marketing, getting your name out there, doing this podcast, talking about the things that you guys do, if it can save somebody a whole bunch of time, or a shop owner, be able to allow them to offer a solution for their customers, then that's what we all want. That's where everybody wins in solving these problems.
yeah, and we spent a lot of years trying to figure out how to market ourselves, and we've learned a lot about running a business, but there's nobody in this building that's going to claim to be a marketing expert. And I'm actually really happy about the fact that we finally allowed ourselves, another one that was not necessarily an easy decision, but we finally allowed ourselves to expand our dealer network to businesses that are geared toward wholesale distribution. I was really picky about that early on. For most of the existence of my business, I wanted to have more control over who was purchasing our product, because I looked at that as this company, this person, whoever is representing my brand. And so I always feared, if I allowed a WD to sell our stuff, I had no control over who they were selling it to. I don't even know that it's a legitimate shop. For all I know, it's a guy working out of his garage, on Saturdays, and he got a tax license, and they happen to sell to him. But is he a good representative for our product? Does he know what he's talking about? Can he support it if it has an issue, or am I just going to get every tech phone call there is, and he's going to sell it, take the money, and we get to deal with the rest? And finally wrapping my brain around allowing some of those types of places to sell our stuff has been a good thing, in terms of, it's offloaded some of the load of the marketing, and even, like, I'll ship 10 of something to a WD now, instead of 10 individual somethings to 10 individuals. So it's offloaded our shipping load a little bit, or whatever too. And we still get the tech support phone calls, but now we have a little more man hours to spend on doing some of that kind of stuff, or a little more man hours to spend on, development or something new, or, whatever. Part of this, taking on the machine shop bit is I'm starting to learn how that equipment works. And I'm also starting to learn how to do 3D drawing, for new product. And, if I had a ton of other stuff to do, because I didn't have these other avenues helping us to market, helping us to sell, and whatever, I wouldn't have the time to do that stuff. So it's not an easy thing to let. It's kind of like letting go, and delegating. When we hired a general manager, it's kind of the same thing. It's, you're letting go of some control. You're letting somebody else be the one that determines who they sell the product to, and you have no control whatsoever whether that's a good thing or not. We just kind of had to learn not to care and hope that our WDs are making good decisions about who they take as customers. But it certainly opened us up to getting, to finding some more customers. And we get calls from people who purchased then from WDs or dealers that bought from them, or dealers that are direct with us or whatever. And we support them as if they bought direct from us because it's our product. But yeah, it's been interesting. The whole growth of the whole thing and trying to figure out the right way to approach it it's very fluid.
Well, and I think I guess this applies just across the board, but the one thing we all don't have enough of is time. And you think of adding in the businesses, the people, the processes, everything you guys are working on, and I see this and hear about it a lot, is there's just not enough time in the day to do something. And I think that's one of the hardest parts. Whenever somebody's asked me, hey, you talk with these companies or these people, ask them how do they manage their time, how do they grow to the next level. And I think it's that letting go and trusting and delegating so that you can focus on learning a drawing or a new product or whatever it might be, or your business partner with an idea that he has, and kind of capturing some of that time back. And I think supporting the shops, the brands, the WDs that are out there that are representing you, that sometimes, maybe even mostly, is the first exposure the end user has to a brand or a product. I think of things that I buy. It's through a retailer, and my experience is really dictated by how it was purchasing it from the retailer. And so I think that's something that I could see the challenge of it, and I see how hard it could be to let go. But I understand also how that's freed up and is going to allow you guys to grow even more and, expand what you guys are doing and take it to the next level.
Well, the other thing that's a little bit flattering about it too is think about yourself and whatever you might buy, whether it's truck related or maybe you're into firearms or maybe whatever it is. Everybody's got their favorite retailer. Some for whatever reason they've established a relationship with somebody, they've done a lot of business with them. It's their go-to, the first place they look when they need something.
Yep.
And some of the retailers that have taken us on, they're big names. And we're ecstatic that they're offering our stuff. We feel like that's flattering that they've looked at our stuff and they've thought highly enough of it to add it to their line. And so, that's a cool feeling for us. I'm not out there trying to compete with guys like that on, say, Google, so that if somebody searches something, I'm showing up on the first page. Like, some of those guys are tough to compete with. But the fact that they looked at our product and were willing to go, yeah, I'd love to sell that. I think a lot of our customers would like it. And then it's turned around and become a good relationship for us and whatnot. That's a really cool feeling for us. Because we're nowhere near the size of some of those guys and don't have, the capability of doing some of the things that they can do. But it's cool that they like our stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's where it all comes together and it all works. Because ultimately that retailer, they want to be able to make their customer happy, and their customer's happy when the product they're selling them works. And then the manufacturer is happy and, it just all works like that. I know it can be really tough to put that together, but I think in what I've learned through chatting with you is the planning, the processes, the logical way that you guys have approached this whole thing ultimately sets the company up and the truck owners out there and the diesel shops up to be successful, because you guys have put in the sweat equity and the time and thought of the processes. And before I let you go, before we had done the podcast, and I don't know what this announcement is, but you said, hey, Patrick, I've got something big that I want to mention on the podcast. And I was going to ask you, and I thought, no, I'll just be surprised with everybody else when you tell me. So I wanted to see what you guys got.
Well, you've had a few podcasts where you've been talking to people about, emissions related things and how much fun that's made the diesel aftermarket. And we've certainly had our experience, like so many other shops. We had an EPA visit, and And like so many other shops, it actually caused us to really back off and look at certain products we offer and everything else. So our website today is not at all what it was years ago when, before, even though we weren't selling anything that on our website that would have been deemed problematic. After our visit, we just got kind of gun shy in certain things and took a bunch of other stuff off because like I don't want to give them a reason to show back up again. But along that lines, we had to sit back and look at the product that we make and ask ourselves, do we feel like we're going to have a problem with anything that we make? And I had looked into this in the past and had tried making some phone calls and getting answers on the process and just couldn't get good answers and whatever. But we decided we didn't have a choice and we had to bite the bullet and figure it out. And as of today, although we're dealing with a minor backorder issue on one of the components, so it should be resolved by Monday or Tuesday of next week. As of today, our regulated return system, stand and fuel bowl delete for the 6-liter Power Stroke, has a CARB EO number and is legal sale in California or any other state that abides by CARB's restrictions. That was a hell of a process to go through, but it was important. We needed to do it to know that what we're doing is not problematic, and so yeah, sometime early next week, we will be able to start shipping the first 6-liter regulated return kits that are legal to be sold and installed in the state of California. And we're following up with applications on a few other product lines as well. The process is long and slow. I've got probably over a year involved in this one. But yeah, we literally just got the EO issued a few days ago when I sent you that email, and I got the last thing I needed to package and ship them properly, other than this part that's back ordered, came in today. So we're really excited about that. It's been a learning curve, and I'm hoping that the next ones go a little bit smoother. But we picked a tough one, going after a 6-liter, which is definitely an emissions vehicle, and so we're really ecstatic to say that we have that EO number issued and we're legal to sell that product in the state of California.
That's huge. That's it's so massive, and I have for a long time. One of our most, I always look, I love analytics. I've mentioned this before, and I like to see which states we get the most plays or, where we surge at and different things. In California, it goes between California and Texas, every week. And so I know there's a lot of diesel truck owners out there. I know that they face the same problems as anybody in any of the other 50 states when it comes to maintenance and keeping their vehicles running. And so to know that there is a solution for a problem that they have that they can install on their truck and they don't have to worry about it. So when they go get emissions testing, they've got the EO number. It's massive. And I think what you guys are doing with that and the approach with it, it's so refreshing because I have talked about it for years with guests, and what's it going to look like? What's the future going to be like? How can you confidently install these parts and not worry about it? More states or more localities are going towards kind of the standards that California has. And so it's so refreshing to see the step, and there's a lot of 6-liter fans. I've done some podcasts with 6-liter owners in California and 7.3s and everything else. So I think that's awesome. And I think as an industry, people are going to be proud of you guys and what you're doing. And I look forward to seeing more of it so that those guys can have solutions for their trucks as well.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And I hope, like I said, I hope the learning experience of the first one makes the next ones a little bit less difficult to get by. But yeah, it's a big deal for sure. And I certainly hope that a lot of other people in our business are looking to take the same step. I think it shows an intent to be part of the overall system and try to improve not only our industry and the way our industry is perceived, but in reality to try to improve actual emissions. We owe it to our kids to leave this place at least as good as we found it, if not better, and not make it worse. And So I as much as I'm bothered by some of the way some of the things are mandated and some of the unintended consequences of some of that type stuff. Still think we have to do the right thing, and so it was an important step for us, and hopefully it's something we see other people in our business continue to pick up and do more of.
It was a pleasure to chat with you, Dennis. I knew I was in for a great chat, but I didn't know all those things about your journey, the lessons that you learned, and there's so much valuable information in all of them that I love it when I can just point a listener to an episode, send them a link, and say, "Hey, check out my talk with Dennis. He answers exactly, or he went through exactly what you're going through." And I think these products that solve problems, like I mentioned before, it just it sticks in my mind. I know it sticks with truck owners as well. Where we should look when we have this problem, or we need to solve something, or just maintain our vehicles, because we're attached to them. A lot of us are. We get attached to them for a lot of different reasons, and they're hard to let go of, and we want to be able to make sure that they last. So it was great to chat with you. I know there's going to be people that have questions, whether they are a truck owner or a diesel shop owner or something like that, and they're like, "Hey, somebody's asked me for your product before. I want to be able to get more of them. I want to stock them, or I got questions for you." What's the best way for people to be able to reach out to you guys and ask questions about products, things you guys are working on? Maybe they're local to you and, want to stop in and get some work done or maintenance done. How do they contact you guys?
Well, probably the easiest way is going to be one of our websites, and we've got a few. The e-commerce site is strictlydiesel.com. If somebody's local and they're potentially interested in our service and repair operations and things that we're capable of doing there, we do also have strictlydieselrepair.com, which is geared primarily toward our local service operation, and it doesn't really have parts for sale or anything like that. So either one of those will get you our address, our phone number, our email, all of that. There is also drivendiesel.com. That's not really a very well-built website just yet. It's primarily a dealer list. But if you're interested in our products, and you've got a favorite dealer, it's a place you can check and see. It's got all of our big dealers listed on it. We've got many small dealers as well, but all of our kind of big heavy hitter dealers are listed at drivendiesel.com. And you can also see that full product line at our e-commerce site at strictlydiesel.com. So any one of those three will get you, depending on what you're looking for, to some either access to our product or to contact information to reach out to us.
Well, it was fantastic chatting with you, Dennis. Like I said, I appreciate you sharing your story with us and giving us some valuable lessons you've learned, and then also that huge announcement, being able to deliver it to Diesel Podcast listeners. I know they're going to appreciate it, and it was really cool. I know there's so many other topics, and there's going to be other things I'm going to want to chat about with you in the future when it comes to performance and racing and tons of other things. But like I said, I appreciate your time sharing your story and look forward to talking again in the future.
I do as well. I appreciate it.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. So if you're in the market for a knife, they've got a ton of different choices to meet any budget that you might have. And we really appreciate them offering that 20% off site-wide code just for you guys. Their latest model in 2023 is the Duralock lineup, and the blade, it comes with D2 steel. It's got a super smooth opening mechanism, a bunch of different blade styles, handle materials, handle designs you can pick from. So if you're in the market for something for EDC or hunting, fishing, something to have it around the house, at work, definitely check them out. And we really appreciate them offering that code just for you guys. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Loewen of 23 Diesel, Jay Cole John, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who follow us on social media, subscribe on YouTube podcast apps. We appreciate all your support and look forward to bringing you more of the episodes that you guys want to hear in 2023. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.